How did a so-called walking simulator sell nearly 19 million copies? How did a game with no traditional combat, no flashy gimmicks become one of the most emotionally impactful stories in modern gaming? We live in a time where fast-paced, high-octane action games dominate the market, where loud often overshadows meaningful, and yet, somehow, a game like Death Stranding, built on loneliness, grief, and the quiet weight of connection, captured the hearts of millions. It makes you wonder, what if games don't need to be fun in the traditional sense to matter? What if they just need to be true? And don't get me wrong, this video isn't just about Death Stranding. It's about a growing genre of games that are reshaping how we see storytelling. Games that explore isolation, memory, regret, and acceptance in ways no other medium can show us. Because while the industry keeps chasing bigger budgets and louder explosions, these games are rewriting history in real time. And maybe they're the future of gaming. Following the idea that games like Death Stranding are redefining what we think games can be, I want to talk about something a little personal. I spent the last 2 weeks diving into Death Stranding 1 and 2, and honestly, it was one of the most memorable gaming experiences I've ever had. And if you looked at my most played games before this, I played games like Call of Duty, 2K, or Madden, and that's pretty much it. You know that this isn't the kind of game that I would usually pick up. But after finishing both entries, something clicked. We're living in a time where gamers, myself included, constantly complain that there aren't enough good games coming out. We're stuck in a loop of safe, familiar titles, yearly releases that barely change, with Call of Duty, Madden, 2K, then add in the huge mountain of remakes. We've seen The Last of Us re-released in some form at least 7 times at this point, and in the middle of all that repetition, somehow, Death Stranding emerged. Completely original, completely bizarre, and honestly just completely brilliant. Now, technically speaking, Death Stranding is an action-adventure game, but not the way that we've been trained to understand what action is. You're not fighting against bosses every 20 minutes, you're not mowing down enemies with flashy guns or fancy moves. You're hiking through dangerous terrain, delivering supplies to survivors, reconnecting a fractured world one small step at a time. It's quiet, it's methodical, and it demands patience, which ironically is something most of us don't bring to games anymore. And that led me to ask a difficult question. Why do modern gamers hate video games so much? It's not because modern video games are bad, it's because a lot of them are different. We've entered a generation where the standard expectation is more about familiarity than innovation. Most gamers are deeply rooted in nostalgia. We grew up with certain franchises, certain mechanics, and we keep chasing the high of those memories. When something doesn't immediately give us that same feeling, we push it away. We label it as boring. We say it's not a real game, but the truth is, we're just scared of change. Think about how many people skip over original games just because they aren't recognizable. A new story, a weird premise, a slow build-up at the beginning of the game. Most won't even give it a chance because it doesn't fit into what they're used to playing. And honestly, I was that person too. But here's the thing. Originality is exactly what the industry needs right now. We keep saying gaming is in a rut, but we ignore the games that try to break the cycle. Death Stranding isn't just a game about walking. It's a game about loneliness, about rebuilding, about connecting. And the fact that it exists and that it sold millions of copies shows that there is a hunger for something more out there in gaming right now. We just have to be willing to meet it halfway. So if you're someone who's felt disconnected from gaming lately, like nothing excites you the way it used to, maybe it's not the games that changed. Maybe it's the way that we approach them. And maybe it's time we stop asking for the same old thing and start being open to something new. But it wasn't just the gameplay or the originality that grabbed me when it came to Death Stranding, it was the universe. It's chaotic, strange, and often it's hard to explain to someone who's never played it before. But somehow, it all works. The story of Sam Porter Bridges isn't about saving the world in the traditional sense. It's about saving yourself. It's about a man quietly drowning in guilt and isolation and the weight of losing his wife and his child at the same time, and choosing slowly to reconnect back to the world. Throughout the game, Sam doesn't just rebuild the country, he rebuilds his capacity to feel again, to trust, to care. By the end of the first game, this broken man who couldn't even tolerate the touch of another person is willing to sacrifice himself for others. It's subtle, but powerful. And it reminded me of what gaming used to feel like, that same sense of wonder I got as a kid playing Pokemon XD on the GameCube. That curiosity, that excitement where every single moment made you wonder, what's coming next? And it's not just Death Stranding that's doing this. Take Returnal, for example. A game that on the surface is about shooting aliens in a time loop, but underneath, it's about grief. about a mother who's stuck reliving the guilt over the death of her son. Every loop, every failure, it's a metaphor. And you don't just watch her pain, you live through it with her. These are games that take risks, that trust you to sit with uncomfortable emotions, that give you a once-in-a-lifetime kind of experience, the kind that lingers after the credits roll. But the only way these games get made is if we give them a chance. If we stop writing them off as weird or boring just because they don't look like what we're used to. Because sometimes the games that break the mold are the ones that help us piece ourselves back together. Now, don't get me wrong, I get the caution. I understand why people are quick to hate on bad games. We've seen the missteps like with Dragon Age: The Veilguard, Assassin's Creed Shadows, and a flood of the other AAA titles that felt more like cash grabs than actual passion projects. It's exhausting. And yeah, it's easy to feel jaded when it feels like every big release is just another disappointment. But here's the thing, gaming isn't dying, it's evolving. In fact, the industry has never been in a better place creatively than right now. Small studios are doing what the giants have forgotten, taking risks, telling honest stories and building worlds that actually make you feel something in the process. And those experiences, they're out there, they're waiting for you. You just have to be willing to look past the hype and give them a chance. Not every game needs to be a blockbuster, not every story needs to come from a billion-dollar franchise. Some of the best games I've ever played, they came from genres I used to avoid entirely. Take Balatro for example, a roguelike deck builder based on poker. That alone would have turned me off years ago. I don't even like poker, but this game, it took something familiar and turned it into a mind-bending strategy loop that had me hooked for hours. It wasn't about gambling, it was about risk, momentum, and making the most out of what you're dealt. And honestly, that lesson hits a lot deeper than just playing cards. And then there's Expedition 33, a slower paced turn-based RPG that revolves around team synergy and memory. That sentence would have put me to sleep back in 2017, but playing it now, it's one of the most emotionally layered games I've ever experienced. Every decision feels personal, every step forward feels earned. It's not just about what you do, it's about who you do it with and what you're willing to lose along the way. And of course, we have Black Myth Wukong, a game I assumed would just be another Souls-like clone, but it's not. It's poetic. The boss fights feel like dance choreography, not just battles, but rituals. Each enemy teaches you something about patience, about timing, about understanding your own limits. These were all games I never would have touched 5 years ago, and that's the point. Every one of them challenged my comfort zone. They forced me to stop chasing what I thought I liked and start exploring what else is out there. We talk about wanting new experiences in gaming, but sometimes we're the ones in our own way. Clinging to nostalgia, judging a game by its trailer, dismissing something just because it's unfamiliar. But here's what I've learned. The best stories in gaming aren't always the ones that you're looking for. Sometimes they're the ones that surprise you. The ones that challenge how you think, how you play, and how you feel. So instead of hating what gaming isn't, try discovering what it can be for you. Because maybe the future of gaming isn't found in louder graphics or bigger budgets. It could be found in the smaller stories that hit close to home. Thanks for watching, and if you're still with me, I think you'll really enjoy this video.